Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to another fine Wednesday morning. Welcome to another coffee break chat. I'm your host, James Jackson, he, they pronouns, executive producer, Light Thief Productions. We've got, I think, a great show for you today. Let me find my notes. This is an ongoing process. Every week, I have the same dang problem. Somebody shoot me. I don't know why this happens every time. Um, I literally I had them open right here. I don't know what happened to them. Anyway, all right. There it is. We're gonna go today. We're joined by Avi Filder from New Light Theater, talking about Fun Home. We've also got a bunch of stories that reflect significant cultural and community developments. Let's get into it. Um, Before I get right into the day's topics, I wanted to quickly talk about something that I noticed driving my child into daycare this morning, which is there's a return, a change with the current mayoral office, back to kind of an older style. Um, some might remember before Mayor Kenny that there were a bunch of little intrigue moments in Philadelphia politics with various council members and the mayor's office going and the office of the sheriff and a couple other people going back and forth about parking on the apron of City Hall. Well, now, actually, since inauguration day for Mayor Parker, every morning, there's, two or three, and this morning there was like 12 cars parked on the east apron of City Hall, which, impressive change of tack. I don't agree with it, but, let's see what else through this conversation we can find out about changes of tack and returning to old ways. At any rate, I'm gonna bring our guest on screen. Avi, welcome to the show. Please say hello, introduce yourself, your pronouns, what it is you do.
Hello, thank you for having me. My name is Avi Filder. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a Philadelphia-based theater artist, and I'm here today to talk about New Light Theater's production of Fun Home, which I've been the assistant director on over in Wilmington, Delaware, just a quick regional rail or Amtrak ride away from the city.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the show. What is it like being an assistant director for those that don't work in theater or film? What's it like being an assistant director for any sort of arts project involving multiple people?
Sure, yeah. Well, this is the second show that I've ever assistant directed. The first was last summer over at the Northwestern High School Institute in Evanston. Shout out Cherubs. And my lovely directing teacher from back when I was a college student, Kyle Metzger, is the one directing Fun Home. So he reached out to me and was like, "Hey, this production takes on a directing apprentice. Do you want to do it?" And I was like, "Yes, of course." So we've been in rehearsals for a little over a month since February 3rd, 4 nights a week, recently ramped up to 5 and then 6 nights a week because we are rolling toward opening night. So, as the assistant director, I've basically been Kyle's right hand man, sort of sitting by his side and jotting down our notes together, serving as a second set of eyes and ears. Like, there's sometimes a lot of action happening on stage. So, sometimes if we run a scene, I'll be like, "Oh, did you see this problem over in this corner?" And he'll be like, "Oh, I didn't see that because I was watching this really great thing happening in that corner. So, let's go back and look at that." And when he's put up a piece of blocking or introduced a set piece or a prop that he's like, something's off with that, I can be the person to chime in and be like, crazy idea. What if we changed it to this? Something he said a lot when I was his student when I was still in college was well, actually I came up with this term, but he jumped on it, so let's call it his thing. Is directing is like being a villain, and learning directing is like villain school because you're really sort of influencing the people around you to give a certain performance and create a certain show. So we've been doing our little, hench person and evil villain laughs on the side as we whip this world into shape around us. But the actors, of course, obviously also bring so much of the story to it. with them and their incredible performances. The whole cast and crew really is just a dream to work with.
One of the things I've always said about directing is that I find fascinating is when my words come back to me when I haven't spoken them, like when I've just thought of an idea and then I'm directing and going along, and then suddenly an actor says, or like anybody on on the cast or crew says something or does something that is exactly what I was thinking, and I hadn't uttered that word set of words, but that's what I was thinking. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
uh,
it's really magical when people just read your mind and you're
yeah.
like, oh, I don't even need to do my job today. They just got it.
um, Tell us a little bit about Fun Home. What has it been like working on Fun Home? Fun Home, for those that aren't familiar with it, give a like brief synopsis of the piece and the issues discussed.
Yes. So Fun Home is a musical based on a graphic novel memoir by Alison Bechdel, famed lesbian cartoonist known for her 90s era strip Dykes to Watch Out For, as well as accidentally originating the Bechdel test, which is probably what most people have heard of her from, especially people who aren't theater people. The idea of how to decide that a movie is feminist or not, which her friend came up with as a joke, and she put it in her comic as a joke like 30 years ago, and now people take it as gospel. And she was like, wait, I never meant for that to happen. But regardless, she wrote a memoir in 2006 about her experience growing up gay in a rural Pennsylvania town, Beech Creek, population under 700, with her father, who was also gay but closeted, having grown up in the 1930s and 40s, her being born in 1960. Um, and her experience growing up with a dad who was occasionally, emotionally abusive, physically abusive towards her, her brothers, and her mother. And then getting older, realizing she was gay, finding out he was gay. And the memoir and the musical both take place from the perspective of, an adult Allison now in her 40s, looking back at her childhood and her father's life and death, and how they sort of intertwine and parallel each other and contrast each other. Um, and her father passed when she was just about 20 years old, 1980. And she believes it to have been suicide. He stepped in front of a truck. The details are, a little murky. The driver says that he walked by and then stepped back into the road, but Allison talks in her memoir and in her musical, and in, interviews and such, about all the circumstances surrounding it. And that's why we've partnered with the organization NAMI, National Alliance of, maybe make sure I'm saying this right. I don't want to misspeak. National Alliance on Mental Illness. I was gonna say I'm 98.7% certain, but let me not mess this up. Um, so New Light Theater is a nonprofit that works with charity organizations and support and advocacy organizations with each show they do, in order to try to, as the name implies, bring a new light to such issues. So since this show is so wrapped up in this idea of mental health, both in Allison's mental health and in the mental health of her father, Bruce Bechtel, and how his journey is shown through her eyes, we partnered with NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness. Um, would you like me to go more into that? I know that that was
I
one of.
What has it been like, being an assistant director? I mean, this piece, I don't know you personally. I've not met you before today. But I assume that if you wanted to work as a assistant director on this sort of piece, it would speak to you in some sort of way. And obviously it has themes and topics that I mean, at times, critics have said, like that you should limit Fun Home to like only an adult audience. What has it been like working on something that, has discussions of things that some people find difficult or offensive, and then what did it mean to you to work on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. Yeah, so Fun Home has sort of become a bastion of lesbian iconic behavior in the queer community. Like Ring of Keys, which is a song delivered by the character young Allison, like has really become an anthem. Changing My Major, another like very much lesbian anthem delivered by medium Allison, who is a college student. And like the cast and crew, Kyle and myself are very open about being queer artists who really care about this work, and how it reflects our own lives. Most of our cast is also very open about being queer artists who this show means a great deal to. Um, that's been the kind of scary thing, honestly, is knowing how much this work means to so many people. Um, and I honestly am not so worried as much of backlash about people being like, this is inappropriate, as much as I am about backlash from people being like, you didn't do a good enough job with our incredible queer musical. But as for anyone who, yeah, I have my friend actually who's visiting their cousin in Philadelphia was talking to their cousin about if they want to bring their kids to see the show. And the kids ended up like they're going to like a birthday party or something that children do for fun when they're not theater people who are seeing shows all the time are doing. But I was thinking about it, and you saying that question made me think about it more, and it's like we have that number delivered by small Allison, who all of the scenes she's in reflect her being like 8 to 14 in that range, and she already knows at that point, like she realizes she's, even if she doesn't necessarily know the word queer or know the word lesbian yet, or be able to put into words that she is attracted to girls, like she knows immediately that she is different, and it makes her feel all these different types of ways. And like kids know, you're never too young to realize that you're gay, and you're certainly never too young to be bullied for being gay. And so I think it's almost more important for young people to see this show, because they can either see themselves on stage and have that moment of, I'm not alone, there's people just like me. Um, or they can maybe realize that they should be treating other people a little more kindly if they can sympathize with someone else through an actor's performance.
I think, yeah, it goes to representation. I think is the important word there. Is the word that we use currently to kind of communicate all that down into a quick way of saying it. But yeah, representation matters. Seeing somebody on stage or their story told that matches your story. Definitely nobody's too young to ever get bullied about something, and anybody who's in any way quote unquote different from their peers will, and that is everybody. Everybody's always different in some way from their peers, but you very quickly at a very young age realize that you're different in whatever way. I wanted to talk about the what is this called? Sorry. There's a Reading Rainbow documentary coming out, getting a short release in New York and a couple of other cities, and then getting a wide release in theaters everywhere, and then also on video on demand through Amazon. And it's called Butterfly in the Sky. It's about reading Rainbow, and obviously, LeVar Burton. And when I was a kid, reading Rainbow was super important. I'm, in my late 40s now, so the reading Rainbow might not be as culturally important to you, but like it was our version of like inclusivity. Like there's a lot of themes of inclusivity in reading Rainbow, in the production of Reading Rainbow, and all of the children's television workshop stuff, all the stuff that was produced through public funding at the time was very inclusive and representational. And I think it's interesting to see the development of these narratives, and how important they are to have entertaining narratives that are representational for all children. And like we went through a small period where I would even say like representation kind of took a step back, like where the in the in the 90s and early 2000s, I would say we took a step back where there was a lack of representation for different identities, for different people who look different or are different. Um, I don't mean to date you, but what like you're obviously younger than me. I would guess by half, at least. What has been your experience growing up with representation and access to representational artwork as a child?
Yeah, I do remember reading Rainbow, little bits and pieces from my childhood. I was born in the year 2000, which is a fact that makes a lot of my older coworkers at all of my jobs have an existential crisis in front of me
Yeah,
about.
no, I was
So
born I graduated in 1996 from high school,
there we
okay?
go.
So,
Yeah, I
I was
was 90.
working in 2001 when 9/11 happened.
Yeah. And see, like, people now think that I'm young, but we're working with these kids on the show who are playing, Small Allison and Small Allison's little brothers, who are like, one of them just turned 10, one of them just turned 15. And so they've got all these cultural references that we don't know about. So, like, they're teaching us things, and we feel like I feel so old. And again, but yeah, in terms of representation, um, like, well, you were talking about reading Rainbow. I was thinking about, like, Sesame Street always seems to every few years have like a new character that's like they had like their first like autistic character. They had their first, I believe they had a deaf character. Sesame Street was always popping in these new people exist in the real world, individuals in our community, showing them existing and welcomed and loved by a community. Um, something that was like really sticks out to me as a representation of queerness on screen in my youth. That is the episode specifically is about to turn 9 years old this month. Is the animated show Steven Universe, which was on Cartoon Network. A lot of theater people may be familiar, but it's about these cool alien space rocks and this boy who's half space rock, half human. Um, and 9 years ago, one of the main characters was revealed to actually be a fusion between two space rocks is again the best word I could think of it. But these two characters that were revealed to be in a lesbian relationship, and they literally combined into one character because of like how strong their love was. And I just remember seeing that when I was, 14, and that was like world changing for me. I was like, "Oh my God, like little kids are going to see this and see that like that kind of love is beautiful and powerful and world changing." And I mean this show, like I know so many people my age who saw again Ring of Keys, Small Allison's moment, seeing an older butch lesbian and like sort of recognizing something in her. That song was performed at like the Tony Awards, when we were in middle school, and you know, seeing that broadcast on national TV on TV people could watch internationally. It was just like a beautiful world changing moment. Uh, yeah.
Um, what would you say what how would you say that Fun Home integrates your experiences as a person? Like how has being an assistant director on Fun Home allowed you to express yourself?
Yeah. It's just been so freeing to really be able to like know that I don't know if this 100% answers your question, so I'll say this and then I'll try to answer your question more accurately.
Go ahead.
Um, but it's really nice to be in a space where I sort of don't have to explain my point of reference, like my frame of reference, my point of view, because there's already an underlying, if not overlying, sense of like we all already know from what point we're working with. Like I'm not having to constantly be like, oh well this means in like the queer experience like this is what I did, because like so many people in the room have also had that experience, or the experience is written into the words we are saying. um with our Small Allison, again keep going back to this Ring of Keys moment, like really the sort of the heart and soul of the show. I sort of made like a glossary for her of all these things that the character mentioned seeing on this butch, like these like dungarees, which were like overalls that you would see on like lesbians in nightclubs in the 1970s, and the ring of keys is like the carabiner that like symbolizes butchness that came out of, women working men's jobs, blue collar jobs in World War II. Um, and yeah, it's in terms of assistant directing, it's like I feel like there's no hemming and hawing and having to work up to a note or a comment by explaining all the context, because all that context, like for most of the cast in most of the scenes, is already like, yep, got it. Like moving on to like now like deepening the story and getting really nailing down
Right.
specifics.
Let's
Uh,
actually examine the deepness of it and the richness of it rather than having to um this is a problem that occurs in a lot of work where you have a production team that isn't necessarily representational of the characters or the society that you're talking about, because you'll and I see this happen quite frequently, especially, in larger theater companies. I could name some off the top of my head. I don't want to call anybody out like that necessarily right at this moment, but if you see a theater company nonprofit's team page and it's all white men and they're producing a women's show or a show about black people, they're likely to call in, a few people of color or women to provide a voice into that piece. But then your whole job during the production becomes explaining the perspective of a black person on this piece. And it happens frequently. So it is nice, as you're saying, when you have a production team that is already familiar with the perspective that's being expressed.
Yeah. Yeah, and something I love about New Light and something I love about like two of my favorite theaters in the Philadelphia area, like the Wilma and Theater Exile, like Philadelphia in general, like has these specific examples of theater companies that were, if not founded, at least now co-owned or co-produced by women and people of color, so that those stories can take center stage in a very real and honest way. Um, yeah, I'm so grateful for that in Philadelphia, to see queer work, to see female led work, to see people of color led work like front and center on so many stages in the area.
Wanted to talk about YouthBuild Philadelphia Charter Schools I Can, I Will campaign. This is a campaign at a YouthBuild Philadelphia Charter School, which you can look up if you guys are interested. It's a charter school in West Philadelphia. And they have a program for students 17 to 21 that will give those students the opportunity to earn their high school diploma and also a trade certification. Um, and they created the I Can I Will campaign, which through it they run this each year during Black History Month. But they're essentially providing that representation and allowing the students to create their own Black history, becoming elements of Black history in the process. The students are recorded with a message that they find important of themselves. They post a picture of the student with their own personal message, and it allows them to represent themselves and represent themselves in the community. Um, have you? I mean, I think of things like Fun Home, pieces like that, pieces that are relevant to a specific community, as important in that way. Um, how would you say, like Fun Home allows your young actors or young audience to see themselves, to empower them to feel as a member of a community?
Yeah, we um we haven't From the creative team and the production side of team, we have not asked actors in the rehearsal room whether or not they identify with the queer community. So that has been, actors' decision whether or not to tell us. Again, a lot of our actors have been very open about the fact that they're queer and this show means so much to them. Um, and again, it's that idea of like finally getting to tell their own story. I guess I think is what that's getting at is there are a lot of queer people in theater. There are a lot of queer people who are successful actors and artists who but they don't necessarily always get to tell queer stories. So this show is a great way for queer actors and artists to not only like get a gig and be telling a great story, but telling their story. And in terms of like people coming to see it, we actually have next Wednesday, a week from today, on the 13th, Teen Night, which is I believe tickets are discounted. You can go to New Light Theater's website for more information on that. But I know that teens who come to the show can get like pizza and soda before the show, and after the show they can stay for a talk back with some of the cast and crew. So I'm really hoping that having that built into the performance schedule will let kids and teens who might not have necessarily seen this story or know this story, whether literally this specific story or the idea of again queer representation in general, um, will get to see this and get to like debrief with people their age. Um, I was very lucky to come from, a very liberal suburb of Massachusetts where I knew a lot of out queer people my age starting from late middle school and early high school, but like Allison, the main character in this growing up in a very rural Pennsylvania town of 600 people, like some people, a lot of people do not meet other queer people until they are in late high school or early college. So I'm really grateful that now we have things like this where it's like, okay, let's aim this to make sure that younger people get to see it and get to see themselves represented and not only see it but get to talk afterwards. Um, yeah, so I'm hoping that this, and I mean not just that night, obviously teens and kids are welcome to come to any night at the show.
Right.
But I'm glad that we have a time specifically set aside to really make sure we're focusing on letting young people experience this story.
I want to relate a personal story, and you know, the feeling of outsiderness isn't unique, I suppose, to anybody. But um, even now in my late 40s, I find that I can suddenly find myself on the outside, and it's one of my big concerns for my daughter, and also for like the generations younger than me, including yourself. Um, I was at a bar, eating dinner, in the in the bar seating area. And then it was a bar in rural Maryland. So I suppose that for those who know what rural Maryland is like, conjures a specific image. But to paint a picture for those that aren't familiar, it is all white older people. It's all like 60 to 80-year-old white folks who have been uh, experiencing life through whiteness their entire lives. Um, and just for point of reference of what that means, Ruby Bridges, the child who was escorted to class to integrate schools, um, is in her late 70s right now. So these people grew up with like segregated schools in their youth. They're not unfamiliar with racism. There was a lynching in the late 80s in Maryland. There's been racism, sexism, all kinds of things in that social structure for a long time. That being said, there was a patron of the bar who was loudly espousing her views on certain things to her compatriots who were sitting next to her, and went from uh, essentially trans people are crazy and their parents shouldn't let them be trans to how smart um, the governor of Texas is to ship migrants to big cities all across the country. Um, and like I don't know what to do in that situation. I'm obviously out of place at that point. I am the child and grandchild of immigrants. I'm obviously not white. Like it's very visible. I'm not white. Um, and though I don't wear, my queerness as a badge, I consider myself a member of the queer community, and I don't have any problem with somebody who is raising a child who identifies as transsexual. It doesn't. I'm not going to tell my kid that they are invalid for feeling the way that they feel. If they feel like they're, not they don't identify with the sexual organs that they were born with. That's not my problem. That's it's my problem then to support them and figure out how I can support them, not to bully them into being whatever way I wish that they were. Um, at any rate, how do we, we live in a big city. We live in Philadelphia. It's identified by these people who, and obvious. The point of the story is that obviously there is a narrative that is anti-difference, and they don't care what the difference is. They don't care if it's because you're black or because you're trans or because you're Jewish or because you're gay or because you just like wearing long hair. Literally, there's a bill in some southern states right now being pushed to not allow people to do things that don't identify with the cultural norms of their gender. So like I have long hair. I've had long hair for 20 some years. And I it would be illegal according to some of these bills because they're written so broadly. Um, how do we make this not insular? How do we make this uh accessible to people who are feeling this way, but not in that community? How do we reach out to people who are isolated and give them the representation that they need? Um, I don't know. Maybe you have some ideas. I'm not necessarily an expert on this. Nobody is. I think that all ideas are good ideas, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's the biggest question in the world is how can we help people grow and change to see the thing around them. Obviously, as someone who works in the theater, I'm biased towards theater as a storytelling medium. And I've always thought that the greatest way to see life through another person's eyes and to sympathize with them is to see their story told on stage. Um, the flip side of that is theater is often inaccessible to people who live outside of big cities. Um, I think, things like this thing we're seeing more often now that's like filmed performances of theater that then becomes like streaming on this or that service can be a really great step forward for people to see, you know, something they wouldn't have gotten to see on like, Broadway or even just like, in Philadelphia. Um, the internet is a magical place to be like, look at what's happening and even if you can't be there right now, like you can in the future. And then the other way around, is how do we bring stuff like this to those more rural communities and suburban communities who, because queer people should not feel like their only option is to move to a big city in the Northeast. Queer people should get to feel like the steps will happen for their community wherever they are in the country or in the world to become more progressive. Um, I think often a lot about like the Harvey Milk era and how people, a lot of people started coming around on like the side of the gay rights movement because they realized like, oh, my like cousin is gay, my dog walker is gay, my neighbor down the street is gay, and like I didn't think that I like liked gay people, but I love these people who are in my life and they're gay, so I have to accept them. And I think that giving queer people in those rural communities who don't have access to um, like the resources necessarily that a big city would have, finding a way to give those people the strength and confidence to speak up and say like, hey, this is me, finding other people in your community there, growing your numbers, like is, I think, something we need again for people to realize like, oh, I've been told all this stuff about not wanting difference, but like I have to open my eyes and realize that people right next to me are different. And if I love them as a person, then I have to love their differences and advocate for their differences because that makes them, who they are. I think a lot of people are scared of change and are scared of anything that's not what they grew up with or who they are. And I think often it comes from a place of deflection. Like they don't want to be who they are inside. And they have insecurities about that. So instead of trying to look inside themselves, they look down on other people. And like, a former professor of mine would say, like, bullying is a big way to make someone feel small, or is like a small way to make yourself feel big. Is like if you can't accept and love and you're like scared of that, you turn to what's easier, which is to hate. Um, yeah, and that's tying it back to the show, doing my job as a promotional person, but we see that in Small Allison and Bruce for father's interactions is he doesn't want to admit that he's gay. And so he has to make himself like, dress in suits and like be like the perfect image of the husband and the father. And when she starts to express this, like these butch qualities of like, oh, I want to cut my hair short or I want to wear like shirts and pants, he's like, no, like you have to wear dresses, you have to have long hair, you have to be like pretty, you have to be a girl. And so she says, in her like graphic novel that the musical is based on, like he was trying to express feminine through her because he could not be feminine for himself.
It,
And
I wanna just real quick point out that there actually used to be laws on the books
oh
that
yes,
were
there's the articles of
enforceable.
clothing laws.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that would require men to dress in pants and women to not specifically wear pants.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous. Men and women have been wearing the same clothing since we discovered clothing, but anyway, I wanted to, one of the things you mentioned in there was, accessibility through the internet. And I wanted to talk about Facebook going out yesterday. For a lot of people, I forget, CBS News reported it as, hang on a second, I pull it up. 500,000 reports or more of problems reported with Facebook, and 70,000 or more reported problems logging into Instagram. Um, that is the internet for a large portion of the world. In fact, there was a report, an article a couple years ago about how Facebook is synonymous with the internet in a lot of places, like in what we would call developing countries. With countries that are having infrastructure developed into it because companies like Facebook, Meta, and Microsoft, etc., go into those countries and literally provide free internet, but the access to it is like, when we, before your time, when I was accessing the internet, I logged in through AOL, and AOL was the internet. Internet was the AOL. It was AOL for a long time in the United States, even through the early 2000s, and a lot of people didn't have a difference between the two. What what this presents though is a problem in that to provide that equal access, to provide that representation, we're relying on tools that are not governed, essentially. They're not governed by democracy or people in general. Meta is a private company. They can choose what does and does not go on their network. Um, do you think it's important that we democratize these things, or should we worry more about actually just getting them out there? Is there something to fight against companies like Meta, or is it more it'll suss itself out over the years?
Yeah, I do think it's worrying with certain like technological groups, especially like Meta, that it's becoming like sort of everything is turning into one thing, and like suddenly one person or one company owns everything. Because like there would have been a time years ago where if Facebook went down, Instagram wouldn't have gone down, like would have had nothing to do with it. But now that Instagram is like under that umbrella, it's like, oh, Facebook goes down, now Instagram's down too. Um, and I think like, the more and more stuff that gets sucked into the same like branching parent company, like the greater risk there is of losing everything in one, big sweep. Um, so I guess I have no idea what it would look like because I'm not in that sphere or sector like at all. But the idea of trying to make life easier for people to sort of host their own like servers and apps and stuff. Um, like, and there will unfortunately always be, like you said, like these companies will get to decide what is and isn't on their platform. Like, no matter who owns what server or website, they will probably always have some sort of level of control and censorship over those. I feel like there's not as many, or if they are, they don't get the funding and amount of attention, like groups and apps that are like truly like free reign to do sort of whatever you want. um and I think like it's funny again going to those like generational differences. I feel like a lot of people my age and especially younger like don't even use Facebook anymore. They're like, oh, that's for like old people. They are, I no, no, not saying anything about you, saying
No,
what other people say.
I've heard
um
the funny thing is I've heard that, and I've also heard the counter argument that the Gen Z and Gen Alpha or whatever the next generation is are actually still on Facebook, but you guys just like negging us for being.
I love Facebook. Nothing's easier than a Facebook event. Um, but like I feel like something I see popping up a lot more in people of my age and younger and older is like Discord, which is not as much necessarily a social media as it is basically like a group chat maker or like a forum slash like server maker. So that can allow a little more freedom than, for instance, Facebook or Instagram, where there's no overarching ban on any certain specific content. You are making your own and moderating your own content within these like mini forums or servers and group chats.
Well, so this presents a kind of both a good and there's a good, a bad, and bad to this, right? Because obviously, free speech is great. What do we do about the free speech that is causing people to organize into insurrectionist groups and and is creating a kind of echo chamber of hate, or guiding disillusioned young, mostly men, into groups that coddle them for saying that their lack of attractiveness to the people that they would like to date isn't their fault. It's actually the fault of society and those other people. um how do we not allow those two tools of hatred to amplify and grow while also providing a relatively good environment for progress to occur?
Yeah. Yeah, it's difficult. There's like, there are so many like dog whistles and like um code words isn't the right word, but like keywords that like those groups tend to use, that like you can like create, blocking feature of don't allow posts that say XYZ. But then you get the double header of like now folks can't make informational posts like warning against those things, or people will get around it by inserting like numbers and symbols into the words and just or coming up with new words. So I think it's a matter of not necessarily playing like whack-a-mole and trying to take down every hateful thing you see, but also like redirecting the attention of these people who have been sort of like influenced by this dark side of the web. There's a fantastic article. I wish I could find it. I probably won't be able to find it quickly, and I because I don't remember which like news outlet it was in. But I read an article a few years ago that was like, "Help! Our 13-year-old son became a Nazi. Like, what do we do now?" And it was about this family whose young son had gone on the internet a lot and had gotten sucked into that idea of like, well, people don't like you because they don't understand and like you're too good for them and society, blah, 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 blah. And so it was the idea of them being like, hey, like, let's go outside. And let's, again, like meet people who are different than you and sort of, not get lost in that haze of like going down the rabbit hole. Um, yeah, I think it's a matter of encouraging people to widen their experience, and to like take a look introspectively and reflect on how they feel the way they feel, but also literally just like leave that screen sometimes. Like, like the sort of jokey like slang of being like go touch grass means like go outside and play in the dirt and maybe you'll feel better.
I wanted to circle back around to Mayor Parker, and she recently had a speech for the Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce. Went over well to that crowd, although I'm a member of the Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce, and I actually thought her speech was really off-putting. But yeah, there's nothing in here for micro businesses, and micro businesses are something on the order of 3/4 of Philadelphia's tax base. At any rate, Mayor Parker, through her Chamber of Commerce speech, talked about a return to work and called for a return to office 5 days a week for everyone. She's recently also ordered the all Philadelphia municipal employees to return to work 5 days a week. They're gonna roll it out slowly, but it's not like an instant return to work. But at any rate, and there's been some writing about that. People have commented off the record that, oh, well, now everybody in Philadelphia municipal work that doesn't like the idea of having to go to the office every day has prepped their resume and is now looking for a new line of work. Inauspicious, in my view, way to start a mayoral term. Parker seems to be kind of doing things to set herself aside from the era of Mayor Kenny, but also seems to be doing things in a concerted effort to flag and or signal her intention to, as many of us commentators said before the election, make it business as usual in the city of Philadelphia, and that's not in a kind way. We don't mean that as the city is going to bounce back from the pandemic and it's going to be business as usual, but more of the old guard, pay to play. One hand has to grease the other. A lot of money changing hands, and if you don't have money, you can't actually do anything in the city or get any traction. That's what we mean. And I'm wondering, as as a person who works in working with a script like Fun Home, works in the arts, works in a progressive environment. I know this is talked about in Fun Home in a roundabout way, but like how do we how does this kind of inform how we deal with like this kickback moment? There's always this kickback moment, like we go through a period of progress, and then there's a bit of kickback from the people who are losing power or losing sway. How do we deal with that? Why does that come up? Is like where in the narrative of Fun Home is this dealt with? In your opinion?
That's a great question. I feel like the thing about Fun Home that um makes it, I think, so meaningful to so many people is that it's not necessarily about society as a whole. Like, yes, obviously internalized homophobia and within family homophobia will come from societal issues, but it's so human in that it's her memoir, really. And we think of memoirs as being like written stories of like, and I was 7 and I went into summer camp and had a jolly old time. But it is truly just so her human experience. I think that's why humans relate to it so much. And I think that's something we need more of in art and in life, is to, instead of trying to be like, obviously we all want to change the world. We all want to make these wide sweeping worlds of difference and like make as much better as we can, but sometimes it is not only easier but more effective to focus on the smaller stories and to focus on being like, okay, how can I make this one person's life better, because to that one person, like, they are the world. um yeah, I obviously, like you said, like, I work in the arts. I'm not an office like 9 to 5 person. I think that would absolutely crush my soul and spirit. I think it maybe in sort of a naive fashion that like all office jobs should be like 4 days a week. I think there have been other countries where they've implemented that and they've seen like boosts in productivity.
Yeah,
But again,
I don't think it's naive at all. There's
yeah.
actually, there's a good set of studies from the pandemic and from pandemic lockdowns that actually the workforce increased productivity quite significantly when working from home. But yeah, this a lot of what the return to work is about, and not so well disguised, really, is just making Center City look busy, and also increasing the usage of the real estate in Center City that's been losing value over the past 4 years because people aren't using it and don't care about it and doesn't really need to exist. Um, but yeah, I think where you what you said and what I would agree with is that, and what I would expound upon is that the individuals are important in these stories, and the individuals are important in society, and when you're thinking about rules, laws, things that affect society, you have to be more worried about the individual than you do about, like if you're a mayor, you have to actually think about how your words are going to affect each individual you represent, and each person in your city, not just how it affects the city as a whole, and hope that by doing the best for each individual, the city as a whole grows and improves. I think that's possibly where the major difference between um, my politics and like quote unquote liberal politics exists. Is I'm often accused of being a liberal or a progressive, and I'm like, well, yeah, sure, but I don't like liberal politicians or progressive politicians either. Um, so where are those differences? And I'd say that's the difference. Probably is that there's a lot of people out here who realize that we have to take care of the individuals, um, and some of us don't. Some of us think that we can do this top down, and I don't think that's really possible. Um, Maybe I'm crazy. At any rate, we're gonna wrap up here in a minute. do you have any last thoughts? And where can people see Fun Home? Where can people? How much is it? When can they see it?
Yeah, we open on this Friday, March 8th. This Friday and Saturday are sold out. So if you wanted to come this weekend, you gotta free your calendar next weekend. You can go to New Light Theater's website, which is just newlighttheater.com, and there will be a link to tickets. We have a relaxed matinee on Sunday the 10th, which means like less intense lighting, less intense sound, more open to, if you gotta shake off your nerves and be a little talkative in the audience. It's more like open and accepting to a less like strict, everybody quiet as if we're a library atmosphere. And then we have shows the nights of the 13th through 17th. Let me double check ticket prices. Yes, okay. General admission is $25. If you have a student ID card or if you are in the theater industry, you get a ticket for $15. And teen night on Wednesday, which is again, pizza beforehand, talk back after, is also $15, that same discounted rate. Seating is pretty limited. We have about 90 seats per show, so get your tickets now. And we are located at the Opera Delaware building, which is right next to the Wilmington station where the SEPTA and Amtrak go. So you can take the like 50-minute regional rail from Center City, or you can take the like 20-minute Amtrak from Center City, and then it's just basically right down the block.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. I had a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. You're welcome back anytime, of course. And so if you're looking at our lineup and you see some sort of topic that you want to join us for, let us know. Yeah, thanks for joining us today. I hope Fun Homes Run treats you well, and I hope to see you back again soon.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me. I hope to see folks there.
All right. And thank you to the audience. I really appreciate you joining us every week, as you do. As we wrap up today's episode, it's clear whether through laughter, art, or community action, we have the power to face and shape our world. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm reading a script, and I'm not really great at reading scripts. A huge thank you to Avi Fidler for joining us and shedding light on the beautiful complexity of Fun Home. Remember, every story we've discussed today is a reminder of our collective strength and resilience. Stay curious, stay engaged, and let's continue to break barriers together. Until next time, let's keep the conversation going. And I hope to see you next week. Enjoy the rest of your week, everybody.